We are happy to be here to kick things off with you on this topic. And we're going to start off with challenges with coaching. How do you coach today? Are you using Excel, using email, you using a coaching application, a combination of several of these? Are you still waiting by the printer to print something out to hand it over to someone? I don't know. I can't remember which one you two threw that in there.
That was
But
me. That was me. Yeah.
The
Yeah. And
old school.
the reason I did that, Scott, is that, like as we look to, deploy our platform, part of the things that we usually do is we talk about how are you doing your coaching today? And these items that you've listed here, we hear all of those, even still today.
yeah, and we have at least one vote for every one of these. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. And the survey says a coaching application for most people, which is really fun and interesting since we also are an application, but we're here not just to talk about the software, we're here to talk about the methodology behind it and how Lakysha and Kevin have seen really good success in doing this. So, Lakysha, any commentary on this as far as the evolution of how we've come forward?
No, I think what this visual shares with us is that all of these different ways are preferences, right? And so how could you find ways to still be able to allow for the preference, but also be more efficient and effective at leveraging the preference to help in the coaching environment? I'm curious if anyone wants to share in the chat what would fall under other for you. Just curious on what those things might be.
Yeah, definitely share in the chat your questions. We'll answer them along the way. What is other? There were several people who clicked other there, but as we wait for those to come in, let's go ahead and dive into the topic, piggybacking off that poll where, Lakysha, in your experience, how have you observed leaders primarily coaching today?
So I think what I've seen today is that there's a variety of different ways people find ways to coach, right? If you're still in the brick and mortar space, you do it by walking around. I also see if you are in the virtual space, you find ways to engage with your teams, whether it's through the Zoom platform, whether it's through Microsoft Teams, and other different ways like Slack or any other program where you can engage with individuals. I've also seen where because there's so many different ways that you can engage, there isn't always consistency on the coaching process and how we make sure that coaching occurs, but also checking in to make sure that the coaching is effective in delivering on the objectives that we have in front of us. So I've seen it a variety of different ways. I think we're evolving, but as I mentioned earlier, folks still have preference, and we want to try to meet people where they are as much as we can, but also introduce them to new ways to evolve their approach to coaching.
Yeah, and Kevin, as someone who sees a variety of customers on a daily basis, where are you seeing people kind of at that starting point for saying, hey, I think I can go ahead and make an improvement? And then what is their thought process on how they can see the most success and in which tactics are they using to move forward?
Yeah, so appreciate you pulling me in on that one. And Lakysha and I had a chance to work together when she was in a previous role, and they used our platform. And one of the things that Lakysha and I have always aligned on is this whack-a-mole coaching that you see there in that second bullet, right? When you either don't have a really good process coaching playbook in place, and also you don't have a mechanism to really make sure that folks are adhering to understand it, implementing that process the way that you would expect your organization to do. You tend to get that kind of whack-a-mole coaching where folks are just all over the place, both in terms of what they coach and also in adherence to whatever your model is supposed to be, right? So maybe your model says, hey, I require my supervisors to coach my agents one time a week, so 4 times a month, which is also what COPC's standard is. I'll see oftentimes folks will say, hey, have a playbook, but then they don't have like let's say a process excellence team that sits on top of that, or really good team that's going to drive adherence to said playbook.
Could you give some examples, Lakysha, of the maybe structure of the playbook? Like, what are some of the elements that are in that, to Kevin's point?
Yeah, so to double click on what Kevin mentioned, you know, consistency is going to be important if you want to see sustained improvements in your results or increases in the team's overall results and performance, and ultimately the experience you want to give out to your clients or customers. And, you know, what I've seen in the past is you have a variety of different tracking mechanisms, right? So you have one particular manager who prefers Excel. And so they track everything that their teams are doing via Excel. You have someone else who might be really good at developing a SharePoint where that information gets stored and they track it through that. You also have organizations who have ways that a BI, business intelligence report, will connect to their systems to pull the data out for them so there isn't any manual intervention that has to happen. So there are so many different ways that I've seen tracking of and ensuring consistency of coaching being done. And I think that there's a variety of different ways that it can be done to help organizations become more effective and efficient.
And to that point, Lakysha, even you even see what you just described, even inside of a specific organization, company, organization, or LOB that kind of does it in a myriad of different ways. So it's not necessarily just limited to, hey, this particular company does Excel for their coaching. This company does
Right.
SharePoint for their coaching. It is exactly what you described. I oftentimes will see that inside of a particular program, right? So program A, call it, let's say, a technical support team. Maybe that technical support team straddles 2 or 3 sites. You can oftentimes see that disparity in terms of how people are doing coaching. Same program, just from different sites, sometimes even same program in the same site.
Right.
Which makes it impossible from a leadership perspective or a process excellence perspective to, again, continue to inspect and drive folks to the right adherence to the coaching playbook that you guys have in place.
Yeah. So once you have some of that structure outlined and you know your frequencies and how you're gonna what tools you're gonna use, what about the data? You can't do any of the coaching without the data. So what are some of the data sources and how are some of the most effective ways to report on some of that that you've seen? Because I know you have your engagement data, and then how are you tracking that against, team versus team, the performance of an individual against a team? Like, can you give some examples of how you might increase or evolve your journey down that path?
Yeah, so in my experience, again, I think, preference plays a part in this, right? So if what I've seen is you have scorecards, right? Every one of us that runs a contact center, for the most part, has a scorecard. And that's how we get the data on how the teams are performing. In addition to that, all of the administrative pieces that our leadership teams would be responsible for, there's a tracking mechanism for that, whether it's through a report that is created internally or we leverage the systems that are available to us. For example, you might have a call recording system that you use with a vendor that you prefer, and that vendor would then provide external reports to you all to help you understand what's happening, whether it's with the calls that are coming in, whether it's with the coaching that is being done, the calls that are being monitored, and all of those things. So in my experience, I've seen that, data can be captured in so many different ways that for it to be effective, it should be consistent across the board, with the nuances of by team, right? There might be certain things that a specific team will require, but overarchingly, you would want that data source to be in a central location where everyone has access to it, but has access also to the things that are important to them.
Yeah. And one of the keys to what Amplify brings to the table is starting with bringing all that data together and doing it in a seamless and effortless way, and enabling your teams to be able to have a very daily or even more hopefully daily ingestion of that data and importing it to have that full view. But you don't necessarily need to start there. I'm assuming there are some ways you've seen that you can just use what you have, but then when do you kind of know you need to get to that next level of, hey, is it the reporting that's not allowing us to coach better, or is it the processes that's not allowing us to coach better? When do you know you need to start investing in that?
I think for me, it comes from through feedback from the teams. I think the biggest part about using data that is available is trust. And if the teams don't have trust in what is being provided to them to coach the teams to, manage the contact centers, then you'll start seeing people creating their own reporting. You'll start seeing more time
Mm,
spent bringing reports together that take time to create, but also if there was communication and feedback provided of a report that isn't working for them, then maybe we could take some of that feedback and integrate it into the existing reporting that is available so that the teams have more trust in the data. What I find is I know I need to pivot most times when I start to see the performance go in the wrong direction, or I start to see less usage of a particular report. So for me, that's anecdotal feedback for me to say, what's going on here? I'm wondering if I need to, look into this and ask more questions around it. But I think for me, it's leveraging the data, being aware of what's happening and how often it's being used, but more importantly, getting in front of your teams and checking in on it. Hey, we just created this report 2 months ago. I'm noticing a low usage of this report. Help me understand what's going on. How can we make this report better for you to use so that we know that this report will have a positive impact on our performance? What's missing in the report? So for me, I've always been able to tell through those mechanisms, but it also, for me, starts from trusting the reports that are out there.
yeah, and Kevin,
Yeah, and if
much
I
like she was saying, where people can start to go rogue and create their own reports, not necessarily because they are saying yours aren't worth or worthless, but more so that they're trying to get something actionable for themselves. And, if there's that disjointedness and every team starts doing that, there's some, hidden evils that can happen if, you're not connected to your teams. But how about within the data of some of those hidden evils where everything, say you don't have that splintered action happening, but everyone's like, hey, the report looks good, but then there's no improvement happening on the front lines, or the business goals aren't being attained, though everything on the front lines looks okay. Could you dive into some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And first part of your statement, though, really kind of triggered for me. It's, again, everybody kind of doing their own thing, right? In terms of driving your business to high performance, think of it almost like a football team or any sort of sports team, right? You really can't have player A running a completely different playbook than player B, than player C, and so forth. Or you've got to be able to get, and this is what Lakysha did, really, really well in terms of just bringing her experience from a call center leadership, and then more specifically process excellence, getting people all rowing in the same direction. Like I can't underscore how important that is to your business, right? It's just got to happen. In terms of the data, like the thing I would kind of how I'd answer that, Scott, that I deal with quite a bit, and I think back to when I was in operations and client services in a past life, is that we would oftentimes use KPIs, which are important to your business, right? What Lakysha talked about with your balance scorecard, maybe it's conversion rate, maybe it's retention, maybe it's, whatever the metrics that are driving your business. But we would use those as proxy metrics to truly determine if one supervisor is better at the job of a supervisor, not necessarily the output and the performance, but how good they are at the job of a supervisor. So we use these proxy metrics. I can remember times when, using an unfortunate example, where you've had to maybe downsize your staff. And so you're stack ranking your teams, right? And in stack ranking your teams, you're using only performance metrics, which is important to the business. But in that, what you don't see oftentimes is truly how effective supervisors are. And so you may mistakenly say that this person and this person are our best performers because their conversion rate's the best. But if you had the ability to see things like coaching effectiveness, maybe how are they getting to their agents in terms of like task completion, you'd be able to round out that picture and truly understand how good they are at the job of a supervisor, not again just the output. So you got to round out that story, that picture, if that makes sense, Scott.
Yeah, it definitely does. And you mentioned on the coaching effectiveness and measuring your coach and how do you measure your coach? A lot of the software out there doesn't do that. That is one thing that we focus on and we have something to measure that with. It's just built into the platform. But as far as coaching your coaches, and then we move on to the next section of creating the coaching culture. But for coaching your coaches, is that something that you've seen is in most contact centers already, or is it something that you have to build into the culture? And maybe you could like help us transition to that next segment through that.
And is
Is
that
that
for
for
me,
me?
Scott,
Oh,
or
for
Lakysha?
Lakysha, sorry.
Okay. So I think both Kevin and I could answer this. But
Oh,
so yes, many coaching cultures have the ones that I've been a part of and experienced have coaches coaching the coaches, right? There's an expectation on a regular basis that the leaders are meeting with their team members to check in on the status of their teams, check in on performance, but also to check in to see how things are going. There are also ways that the managers of those uh, coaches sit in on discussions that they're having with their team members, participate in team meetings, huddles, etc. So in my experience, the culture of coaching the coach is one that I'm accustomed to. You almost can't succeed without understanding from the leadership team what is happening on the teams, within the teams, and within the coaches that are coaching the teams. So I've never been a part of an experience where there wasn't that level of awareness and integration of ensuring that the coaches have the support that they need, but also that the leaders of those coaches understand and are aware.
Can I weigh in on that one a little bit too?
please.
Yeah. Yeah, so I totally agree with everything that Lakysha said. The thing that I would say that I encounter quite a bit, and also I remember from my time in there, the exact same scenario that we talked about that happens at, let's say, that supervisor or coach level, where it's happening all over the place. Maybe you don't have good visibility into are they getting it done, not getting it done. You take that up a level, and in the same scenario, it tends to happen even at the OM level, which is again why I think having visibility into it, a platform or something that gives you that visibility and a process excellence layer that can help to really drive and make sure folks are doing it the right way. Because you see the exact same thing at the operations manager level. Let's say the requirement is you have to do 2 coachings with your supervisors per month. How do you measure it? How do you see it? Is it happening, right? You have to do a tri-level where you're going in and potentially sitting with someone as the supervisor as they're delivering coaching to their agent. Where are they doing it? Is it happening? Can you see it? Can you inspect it? Can you help to support it, right? And you see the exact same thing, Lakysha, and so forth, we talked about earlier, where some shops that OM might be doing in Excel. Maybe they're doing it in SharePoint. Maybe they're just storing it in Word on their computer somewhere, and monthly or quarterly they kind of true it up into an evaluation of the supervisor, right? But I see a lot of that same inconsistency a level up.
Yeah.
So,
So,
Scott, I'm not sure if you see, but there's a hand raised by Mike.
all right, yeah. So the chat is disabled. Someone let us know that. If you want to just send your questions in through the Q&A function, we'll be able to answer them and pull it into the conversation live. So go ahead and feel free to do that. The next section is around the coaching culture, and you touched on something here that we actually have the next polling question for, just to see where everyone's at. It's, do you have a process or operational excellence team that is responsible for CX improvement? So are you doing this? Is it working well? Is it something you're trying to improve on? Or maybe this year you're going to make it more formal? Is this something that, Kevin, as you look at a lot of different customers and help a lot of different folks, they have some form of this, and where are people typically at with it, with building this out?
Um, yeah, again, I think I see this all over the place. I think BPOs probably do this more than I see in some of the captive sides, in that a BPO tends to have a this is how we do it at our shop. So regardless of if you're on program A or program Z, they have a certain playbook. I see it in the captive side as well. When it gets to the captive side, it tends to be usually when the programs or the that operation tends to bleed over into multiple departments, multiple orgs, multiple geos, like different sites, then I see that operational excellence team really playing a part. If it's a really small shop and maybe, maybe it's let's call it, to put a number on, let's say it's 100 seats, 200 seats, really small shop, all within one site. I typically see, just the leadership from an operational perspective be responsible for or be that proxy process excellence team. But it's definitely something I would underscore. If your organization is bigger than, call it that, 200 seats, or bigger than one program, or bigger than one site, you definitely need some sort of a process excellence team that sits over there and supports and gets everybody aligned to the playbook that your organization has.
Yeah, Lakysha, do you want to give us your interpretation of these results? It looks like we have about a third and a third, if you will, on yes, we got it working well, and no, the opposite end, no, and no current plans to make one.
Yeah, so I think that for those that do have one, working well, and maybe even some small slight improvements to the excellence team that you have, great job there. Always be thinking about ways to evolve, right? As times are changing, as needs are changing, there's different things that we should be thinking about and looking into to make sure that that program continues and that team continues to deliver on the things that we expect for the business. For those of you that don't have one, highly recommend you consider it. One, it helps to take the burden off of, especially if you have a large team that you're supporting, it helps take the burden off of the larger team to work through some of the intricate details that are needed to ensure that the coaching culture lives on. And that way you don't have to do all of the work yourself. Even for the smaller teams, even if it's the leadership team that is the team that is driving that excellence, having a structured approach to how that coaching culture stays alive is also important too. So, if I were to start, Scott, if you don't mind answering some of these questions on the page, one of the things that I thought about when I think what I think about when I think about a coaching culture is sort of like 6 pillars. And so to really develop the strategy of what that might mean for you and your organization, one, I start off with understanding what the vision is. What are the objectives we're trying to solve for? What is that vision statement where we want to foster that coaching culture that really is centered around continuous learning, development, creating high performing teams, and ultimately meeting goals, right? And then the second one for me is more around leadership commitment. What has worked well for me is having an executive sponsor, someone that I know I can go to if I'm the process excellence lead person, that I can go to if I'm having challenges, if I have some ideas that have come up from the team or that I've thought about, that I can go to that person to bounce them off of. Sometimes I even leverage this person to help me drive home some messaging that I might want to scale out to the larger teams. That helps to gain that commitment at a higher level that then gets carried down to the other members that are a part of it. The other commitment that I found to be very successful is identifying subject matter experts as you're beginning to launch this strategy, is those that are very passionate about coaching, those on the team that you know deliver good results, and it's because we know that they're good coaches. Those would be some of the people who you want to bring in early so that you can share with them what the thought is. They can give you feedback on what they think will work, what might not work, and maybe even some new ideas that you haven't considered. And this way you get buy-in, not at the executive level, but also at the individual level for the people that will be a part of the strategy and the culture that you're trying to build. The third thing that I've had success using is a change management plan. So it's important that you're partnering with your corporate communications team. So if it becomes a large scale approach, you would want that language to be spot on to the culture that already exists at your organization, that then ties to the coaching culture that you're trying to create. What has been so instrumental for me is having a project manager right by my side. So I'm not forgetting things, or the plan is going according to plan, when it comes to implementation, when it comes to documenting the steps on that plan on a page that you need, identifying what the stakeholder list should look like, and tracking the milestones so that we make sure we stay on track. From a technology assessment perspective, and this is sort of the discussion we're having now, assess where the technology gaps might be as you're trying to build this culture. What do you need? How will you track how often someone's being coached? How will you track any of the triad coachings that are occurring on your team? How do you track whether or not you're seeing trends in your performance? Technology is a big part of that, and making that assessment will help you as you're building the strategy for this culture. It'll help you understand what you need and maybe even what you might ask for in terms of funding. Then I think about performance metrics. We live and breathe those in contact centers, so it shouldn't be something that will take a heavy lift, but also making sure that there's some embedding of recognition programs as a part of those performance metrics, that you can recognize folks for their achievements, no matter how small. And then using that data in those metrics to iterate your plans as you go along. And then finally, feedback. Feedback is a gift, and you get to choose what you do with that feedback and how you make it better for your teams. But that could be by way of workshops like this. That could be surveys that you send out to your team, using the data insights that you already have access to. I recently did this with my current team, and we're finding out quite a bit of things that we might not have been able to identify just by looking at data. So sometimes having that one-to-one conversation with folks will uncover things that you didn't think of. So that's my approach to the strategy around coaching culture. And I'll let Kevin weigh in on anything that he's seen that I missed.
Lakysha, this is why you're exceptional at your job. I don't know if there's much that I can add to what you just shared. I would probably just reinforce the ability to be able to see and inspect what's happening in your coaching culture. Like, so coming back to even the poll that was done, just our last poll, and I think we had 4 people respond with, "Hey, we do have process excellence today, and it's working well." I will tell you, I hear that when we go through our process of bringing people onto our platform, and part of that process is really trying to do a somewhat of a deep dive, if you will, into what your process excellence is, what your coaching playbook is, and we will oftentimes hear we've got one in place. We will think it's working well, but then when you interrogate against, well, how are you inspecting it? How do you know that this is driving this? How do you know that this results in this? It oftentimes tends to fall apart. There are some shops that really have a really tight shop, and that's amazing. But even again, the ones that says, "Hey, we have a playbook, we think it's working well," they usually don't survive interrogation of how they're inspecting it, how they're driving it, how they're improving it.
So are there any things that you should avoid, or things you should probably look out for, is a better way to say it, when you're going down this path of maybe creating one for the first time, or you have one but you're trying to upgrade it and get it to the point of to where Lakysha described this amazingly well-developed team that's very well thought out. What are some pitfalls you can navigate around or look out for as you build this to make it as successful as possible, as quickly as possible? And that could go to either one of you.
Yeah, so the one that I actually experienced and had to pivot really quickly was involving too many people in the beginning.
Yeah.
Um, I think that groupthink, one, takes shape where, you know, you end up hearing ideas and suggestions that people end up agreeing to. And it, it sort of causes you to sometimes lose sight of the overall plan and the overall objective of why you're moving forward with this. And so the example I'll give you is when I first started developing the coaching culture for a team that I was leading. I wanted to involve everyone. I wanted change management there. I wanted technology there. I wanted everybody there in that first initial meeting. And I hadn't fully fleshed out the strategy. And so, one, I quickly realized that I might have been wasting some folks' time, right? Because, some of the questions they were asking me, I hadn't fully thought through that yet. Um, and so, what I learned through that experience is get you an ideation team first, right? You have your vision and what you think you want to do, and quickly you will identify people who you can bounce it off of, who will say, I don't know if that's going to work because we don't have this today. Or if you're looking to do something like this and you want this, it's going to cost us X amount of dollars that we don't have budgeted, right? So I think for me, it was more about being intentional about who I bring into the fold and when. And then when it gets down to actually cultivating it, is again choosing the people that I want to elevate the message, and then using all of those folks throughout the rest of the journey, but where it matters the most, that their voice is needed. So that was a pitfall that I experienced on my own that I ended up having to pivot really quickly.
Yeah, I love that. The thing I would probably add is it's in establishing whatever your operational playbook is. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. I'm sure everyone's heard that statement, right? It's going to probably be a living, breathing, iterative process that gets refined over time. But I would pick some solid places to start, right? So think about just good, healthy operations in terms of the standards that they set. So things like, and you can find some of this with like COPC does quite a bit of this as well. Like, how many times do I expect my supervisors to coach my agents? Put a marker out there, establish what that is, and then build your playbook to that. How many times do I expect my operations manager to coach my supervisors in a given month? How many triads should they do, right? How many focus groups should they do? Whatever you have that's going to be part of your playbook. Don't let perfect be the enemy of a good. Establish the standard. It'll change as you move forward, but then once you've established the standard, you've got to find a way to be able to quickly inspect it and then support it, right? That's what I would add.
And the last thing I'd add is one thing that worked really well for Kevin and I when we partnered, was that open line of communication, right? And being open to, I might have come to him with something and he might have, that sounds good, Lakysha, but I don't know if we can do it. And I'd be like, come on, Kevin. So the relationship that we built across time is from the matter of respect for the idea, but also respect for being open to hearing whether or not it's a good idea or not a good idea, right? Because sometimes we can get in our own way and that could derail the project. That could derail you moving forward with, establishing the culture that you're looking for. So it kind of aligns to that statement of not looking for perfection, but also being open to accepting the feedback if it's not, what you were looking to get a yes to.
Yeah, that's a really good example because I remember having some of those conversations and some of that feedback that I might provide to, let's say, Lakysha might be, well, your particular company today wants to do a certain thing, not good or bad in terms of perception, but maybe hear how some others are doing it, right? So I think also leveraging, if you can find, some other best practices, like, hey, nobody's doing that. Maybe that is cutting edge and everyone should get on board with that, go do it. Or, hey, nobody's doing that and there's a pretty good reason why. no one's doing it, and maybe you park that item for now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the everything that involves change involves work, and a lot of people might be saying no with no plans, but are still attending this because they are trying to figure out when is the right time? How do I need to know? How do I do this? Which is what we've been going into, but is it worth the time and effort to then go ahead and do all this work that we've laid out here, create that team, pull all the data together, maybe involves buying another piece of software, and then we got to create new metrics and then create KPIs around it and measure it in more meetings, and you're just like, oh, it's getting so daunting. But there's a saying that I learned a long time ago from U.S. General Shinzeki. If you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. So there's no time than the present. And this poll question we had set up kind of emphasizes, how much time are you spending doing admin work, gathering reports, gathering data, doing manual coaching that you don't have any kind of retrospective, is the coaching effective? Uh, uh, yeah, we changed this. The team changed my way too damn long to way too dang long, but
Cleaned it
we
up,
were
did they?
betting that that was going to be the actual majority leader here. What has been a tipping point for a lot of customers that you've seen, Kevin, where they are like, hey, we're trying to do this. We need some help. We're going to bring you in, or hey, we're trying to do this. We've started this process. We've now gotten to this point. Like, what are some of the moments where they're like, oh, it's time now? It's probably a line in the sand, right? A moving target. But then when they do it right, do you see that you actually do get the results that your business was trying to aim at?
I'll answer the last part first. Yes is the answer, right? And I think the tipping point is it's different for different people, right? I think one that's really common is, hey, we've been chasing a certain performance standard in our business, and we can't get there. We can't move the needle. To the point that Lakysha talked about earlier, when we look at or we try to inspect our coaching process, it's whack-a-mole. It's all over the place. Some are doing Excel, some are doing it this way, right? And it's almost like the equivalent would be like, getting a team together. Again, going back to the sports analogy, getting a team together and say, hey, next week we're going to win the game. And we don't come up with a playbook. We don't come up with here's our strategy to attack how we're going to get to win this game. We just throw the players on the field and hope that they get it. Or maybe we spend a very short period of time talking about what the playbook is, and we don't drill it, we don't inspect it, we don't interrogate it, we don't improve it. And we put them on the field, and then we scratch our heads and wonder why performance either isn't moving up, or it only moves up in short spurts and then drops right back down.
Yeah. And I don't know who answered which here in correlation to the first polling question, but my assumption is the 1 to 2 hours or like a 2 to 3 hour motion are going to be the people who have a coaching component in place. They have an excellence team, is running smoothly. And then the folks who answered, no, we're working on it. No, no plans on it. I'm guessing they're the ones who have been answering with like a third of the votes or more on, way too dang long or 5 to 10 hours per week on doing all this manual work. So, any words of wisdom before I move on to how Amplify can help bring this to life for you in terms of why you should just go forward and create this culture, create the playbook, put the operational excellence team together, maybe just some inspirational words, Lakysha, on what you've seen, the benefit is, and it's worth the effort.
Yeah, I would even venture to say, Scott, that there might be some folks who have something in place, but it's not effective for them
Oh,
because they might also still be spending the 1 to 2 hours or the 2 to 5 hours. And that's time that they could get back to really be coaching
yeah.
teams, right? So I would say any of those hours that you're spending, using or creating your own ways to bring the data together should require you to take a step back and understand what is taking so long, right? And so, if you have a platform and you're taking 1 to 2 hours, I would still look into what's taking the 1 to 2 hours, right? And determine if maybe something isn't working that you're not getting, that you could maybe figure out as a part of your strategy for your coaching culture. How do you mitigate that? So instead of it being 1 to 2 hours, it's 1 hour. How can you reduce that time, regardless to what the time is? What are some things that you can put in place to reduce that time even more? My middle name should be efficiency. I tend to think of myself as a very simple girl, and I'll look at certain things and I'll watch the number of steps it's taking us to get to something, and I'll say, well, why are we doing that? Why is that taking so long? Is there a better way to do this? Is there an automated way to do this? And sometimes I'll get notification, this is just the way it is. And I'm like, okay. Or sometimes they'll say back to me, we really haven't really unpacked that. So let's have a dialogue and let's look at the steps that we're taking. So I encourage everyone, regardless to how much time you take sifting through data or coming up with ways in admin work to get to the data you need or get to the conversations you need to be having, to take a step back and still assess that. Because as much efficiency as you can get out of any of the time that you're spending, I think that's time well spent.
Yeah. And one question did come in. What are some ways to incentivize the team and the coaches? Incentivization hasn't been addressed yet.
So that's a broad question, but I'll share
Yeah.
some of the ways that I've incentivized teams. Is we come up with, depending on, of course, we can do incentives on our scorecard metrics, our performance metrics, right? But there's also things that you can do for those that are efficient at doing the work. You can come up with a recognition program for them. You could come up with communication strategies that you highlight and spotlight people who are doing a good job at some of the things that you're asking in this culture. So, if someone is living your values based on how they coach their teams, or if you do employee engagement surveys and you find that there's a leader that gets stellar remarks through those surveys all the time or on a consistent basis, find ways to recognize them, because they're helping to keep that culture going by how they're treating their teams, how they're coaching their people. And then, there's different gamification that you can do through incentives. I've used other platforms to host fun games that, reward people for having the right answer. Because a lot of folks, they want to have the right answer when you talk about your supervisors, or those leading the teams. How do you demonstrate that you recognize that the efforts that they're putting in to drive results is seen and is heard? So I can share so many different examples, and we'll share my contact information thereafter. But I think that you really have to understand who is doing the work, and then tailor it to those individuals and spotlight as much as you can to show people that you're seeing it.
Spotlight as in show recognition and congratulate.
Yes. And let's say you send an update about your coaching culture strategy and you identify someone on the team who is really helping you push this through. In that communication where you're giving an update, also spotlight them in the email.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to so-and-so for helping us push this forward, or thank you for this particular leader who's already completed, or has already exceeded the goal of the number of coachings we are expecting from our team members, things like that.
Yeah, and that's one thing we've actually built into the Amplify platform is finding those areas of recognition for the different metrics that you're wanting to follow, and it just finds those and populates it for you, because everyone's used to finding the data of what's going wrong or who needs to improve on what, but do you have those same processes and metrics set up to congratulate people? It's kind of sad, but probably not as often and probably not as much. And so what we do is bring that to light. So in the closing of the session, or the last section of the session, I should say, we do want to highlight a few things that Amplify does to amplify your coaching and make your coaches more effective and help create a framework to enable you to do this in your own place. So it's not just a reporting tool, it actually helps facilitate this all the way through and provides that mechanism to execute on a daily basis with all the different versions of what Lakysha and Kevin outlined today. So it won't be too long, just about maybe 5 minutes or so. But Kevin, I'll kick it off to you.
Yeah, I'll try to move through this as quickly as possible. So, we started the conversation today talking about process excellence and making sure you have a playbook and so forth, and make sure that your team has something they're marching towards coaching and developing to drive performance, but then the process excellence team making sure that they inspect it and support it, right? Even if you don't have those things in place today, or you do have those things in place today, what this slide illustrates, and Gartner actually did a study on this in the last handful of years, which essentially said that when you think about call centers, your frontline leaders, supervisors, and operations managers are spending somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40% of their time combing through the various disparate applications that you have in order to figure out who to coach, what to coach, when to coach, right? So 30 to 40% of that time. In the poll we threw up a little earlier, we kind of saw a little bit of that same sort of examples where there's so many people who are in the we spend 2 to 5 hours. We spend way too dang long in terms of trying to figure out what to coach. And even when you do figure out what to coach, for those supervisors who I tend to categorize as supervisors, meaning they have this ability to comb through data where most of us don't, not being able to truly understand if your coaching is effective. Did the labor that you put in bear any fruit? Or are you just spinning your wheels, kind of to like Kaisha's point about that whack-a-mole coaching from earlier? So this is one of the things our platform definitely solves. We bring in data regardless of location, so we're agnostic as to where that application is going to bring data in. So you might be using Genesis as your CCAS or NICE as your quality platform. Maybe you have voice analytics that you use maybe from CallMiner. Great. You have all these different components. You've added all these different layers of technology and sources of information, and you've put it in the hands of your teams. But too much information can oftentimes lead to the same output as not enough information, which is you get paralyzed. So you've got to find a way to be able to put that in a seamless dashboard that each user can use. Our platform does that. And again, agnostic to any of the data sources that you may have on screen here. Very brief example of what you might see. And this is an example of like a team leader, just a small section of a team leader's dashboard where we feel it's super important for not just team leaders, but at every level of your business, right? I can't tell you how many times I encounter folks when we're looking to deploy our platform where they are still living in a world today where maybe a team leader can't see their performance daily, can't see how they're performing relative to target, can't see how they're performing relative to their peers. The same thing happens, especially a level lower, where your agents don't have that visibility, right? The way that we structure the platform and bring your data in from those disparate sources, we then present dashboards that are pertinent to every leader in your business. What does an executive need to see? What does a director need to see? OM, supervisor, agent, pertinent to what they need, and be able to measure their performance. This is an example of some intelligence of what the platform will provide. So again, instead of having your team leaders spend 30, 40% of their time trying to figure out what to coach, combing through your disparate sources of information, the platform does that heavy lift for them and recommends the most important metric to coach. It derives at the most important metric to coach by comparing them to what your top performing persona is doing. So think of that as your top 20% of your staff. What are they doing to become the top 20%? Compare that to Kevin, compare that to Lakysha, compare that to Scott, and be very prescriptive in what they should go coach. They probably won't be the same metric, although team leaders tend to fall into this trap, if you will, of coaching everybody on the thing that they feel is important or everybody on the thing that they're good at coaching. That doesn't work. You've got to get very prescriptive on what you're coaching each of your individuals on that'll make the most impact on their performance overall. By doing so, ultimately, what you end up doing is shifting that typical that performance bell curve that you see on the left to more like what you see on the right, right? Instead of having this big, large middle where folks are, maybe very close to target, missing target, or you have that red section that's very large over into the far left where there's a large portion, maybe 20%, 30% of your staff that's way below target. You start to shift it to what you see on the right, because again, you're getting your team leaders to get very prescriptive in what they coach, all with the goal of being, how do I get every agent to be as close to your top performing persona as possible? So just kind of a quick recap, ingesting all of your data, so that black circle in the middle, layering in our AI and actions on top of your data that we've ingested, again, from those disparate data sources. From a performance intelligence perspective, making sure that every leader within your, or every employee within your business, whether it be your executive or all the way up to your agents, have a dashboard that's presenting the information that's pertinent to them. Where do they perform? Where do they stack? What are they missing? What are they agreeing at? What are they working on next? Coaching, so making sure that your team leaders and your managers have the ability to coach in the platform, but not just coach, get some intelligence and direction around what to coach, and then get some reporting on how effective they are at doing that coaching, right? That's the only way for operations managers and or process excellence teams to be able to get supervisors to be better at the job. An OM or a director will almost never have the ability to impact how good an agent will be at the job. All an OM or a director can do is help their supervisors be better at their job, so that the agents in turn can be better at their job. Recognition and gamification that Lakysha had talked about. Super important that, especially in a world today where folks aren't always in the same site, they might be hybrid, they might be 100% work at home. You don't want the opportunities to recognize people to go undone. We tend to always focus on the chaos in the call center. We tend to always focus on what needs to be fixed. But at the same time, you've got some really positive performers on your team that are knocking it out day in and day out, but they aren't being recognized, they aren't being engaged, and they will walk out the door. Last but not least is quality. So within the platform, you also have the ability to bring in your quality and do quality assurance from your QARs or your QA team evaluations and insight to help bolster what your QARs are doing as well. Having that all within one single platform where folks can see it, action it, and then measure how those actions are impacting the business.
And includes manual and auto QA as well.
That's correct. That's correct, sir. Yes.
Yeah. All right. And then with that, we've helped all sorts of companies of all sizes. Obviously, we have some of the more recognizable brands here, but you could have 100, 200 agents, all the way up to tens of thousands of agents on your team. As you can see here, we scale to the larger size very easily, and our business is set up to where the largest teams within our company are the customer-facing teams. It's not, half the company are engineers. So we focus very much on helping you through this transition, helping you build this framework for you to have your operational excellence team supported by more than just a technology. We're helping you understand the data, pull different data points together that you've never seen before, and bring that value to life that the business might not have even had the advantage of having it at some point in time or at any point in time. So with that,
what's not illustrated there real quickly, Scott, if you don't mind. So we talked about the industry silos. Clearly our platform is also used by, many of the major mid-tier and small BPOs that are in the call center space as well.
Yeah, all sizes of BPOs, all
That's
regions
correct.
of the world. I think we're in 10 countries now, something along those lines. So, and these aren't the only verticals, just, some ones to call out that we have a certain level of expertise in and have shown a lot of success with our customers. We are not here to just sell you something. We're here to actually make you better at your job and make your team more successful, which is why our customer team that Kevin leads a portion of, they all have dozens of years of contact center experience before coming on board. So they are true consultants, and that's why we're bringing such wonderful people like Lakysha to present to you as well. So Lakysha, any closing words before we end the session?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to share experiences and insights into what I've leveraged and used to build that coaching culture strategy, but also implement that across multiple teams in a variety of different industries and team sizes. So thank you for having me. And as mentioned, if you want to reach out, let me know.
Great, Kevin.
Yeah, I appreciate the time today. Lakysha, it's always amazing to hear how you think about the business and continue to bounce ideas off of you. So I always get smarter, I feel, when we get chances to connect like this. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone, and please have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thanks all.